Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to be doing to get this carburetor project started is removing the seat. You can do a lot of the carburetor work, getting the carburetor out without having to take the whole bike apart. So underneath the seat here is going to be a latch. We're going to remove the seat. Then you're going to need some basic tools. So what we're going to need is we're going to need a flathead, a Phillips head. Looks like Phillips on that side. Let me see what's on this side. Don't make fun of my headlamp either. These things are awesome. It's probably one of the best $15 I've spent. Definitely comes in handy when you need both your hands and you don't have a way to hold the light. So this is a hex here on this side. So let me get the tools that I'm going to need. We'll be good to go. So we're going to need a hex. I'm going to let you guys know the exact size you're going to need here in a second. Flathead and Phillips head and some pliers. So I will show you what you need here in a minute. All right, so as you can see, we got the carburetor here. So I've got my tools. I've got my flathead. I've got pliers, Phillips head, some basic tools. This is actually very, very easy. It's pretty simple to get this carburetor off. So one thing you want to do, step one, is going to be to make sure you turn the fuel off. So otherwise what's going to happen is as soon as you pull that fuel line off, you're going to get fuel all over you. So fuel shut off is right up here. So right now it's set to all the way down, which is on, and I'm just going to turn it all the way to the left for off. And you'll see it'll face sideways, if you can see that. Get a better shot. Yeah, so it'll be sideways. So now we can go ahead and remove the fuel line there. So I'm just going to twist this clamp. If you have like a, I believe it's like a 5/32 or quarter inch, something small like that, that'll work too, but flathead's not bad. So let's go ahead and pull that off. Get the fuel line off. All right, just got to loosen it up a little bit just so you can get the fuel line off. Pull that off there. A little bit of gas still. Okay. Sometimes you have a bad petcock and you'll shut the fuel off and it'll still piss fuel out, and that's always a pain because then you got to plug it with like a screwdriver or clamp it off with some pliers or whatever. But one of the choke is out. All right, so then next step, we're going to remove this crankcase vent out of the way. Just pull it off and we'll tuck it away, just so we have some room to get the carb out. The carburetor is going to be coming out this side. So once we get everything disconnected, then we can just twist it and pull it out this way. It's a lot easier than having to pull the plastics off and pulling the tank off and all that. It's a lot of time for something that you don't really have to do. So this makes it a lot more simple to get the carb in and out each time. So, all right, so now next, let's go ahead and we're gonna disconnect the airbox hose here, loosen that up. And now I've had about 8 or 9 of these carb model YFZs, so I'm pretty good at tuning them. I'm pretty proficient at getting these carburetors on and off and getting them dialed in. I'm in Florida, so I'm at sea level. So, you know, anybody else who's up north or in different parts of the U.S. or different countries, you guys may have to jet your bikes differently for different elevations and for different temperatures. So keep in mind you may have to change your jetting year round depending on what the temperature is and all that, because that'll definitely affect how the bike runs and how it starts and all that. So all right, so let's get this air hose pulled off. So what I like to do is I like to pull on it, and then it hurts your fingers a little bit, but what you do is you kind of reach in and grab the hose and pull it up. So I finally got it out of the way. That was a pain. I kind of used a screwdriver for leverage, but basically I just pulled it up from down there, and now it's resting against the rear shock so that it's out of the way, so you can pull the carb out of the boot that connects it to the motor. So it just gives you a lot more room, and it's a lot easier that way. So let's continue. Okay, so now we just have to undo this clamp here, this one here. This one you don't have to undo. That's only if you're trying to take the boot off the motor. We just have to get this one undone so that we can get the carburetor out. But let's go ahead and undo that one. So this is just a small Torx. I'm just going to loosen that up. You don't have to come all the way off. You just got to get it loose enough to where you can wiggle the carb free from the boot. And it looks pretty loose right now, so that should be enough. You can move the clamp around on the boot, and it's usually loose enough to where you can get it off. Now, what you'll also see under here is that we need to take this cover off, because underneath this cover is the throttle cable, and the throttle cable has to come off so we can completely remove the carburetor from the bike. So we're gonna have to undo those two Torx. So let's go ahead and do that. Almost done getting these bolts out. I had to take the other one out because I couldn't hold the camera and do it at the same time. But these are just a little bit larger hex. I keep saying Torx, but these are a little bit larger hex than what is on the clamp there that we used earlier. So you'll need two different size hexes to work on the carburetor part of it. So let's keep all these together and safe so we don't lose them. All right, so now if you look here, you will see that this bike already has the zip tie mod done, which is good. That's one less thing that we have to worry about. So I just picked this bike up, and it runs, but it's really rough right now. It's a little rusty, you know, from being left outside, and it just needs some love, and had a lot of bog and just didn't want to stay idling right, and just needs some TLC, that's all. But yeah, so now we can go ahead and get the throttle cable off. We're gonna need that completely off so we can pull the bike, or I'm sorry, pull the carburetor off the bike. So the way we're gonna have to do that is we're gonna have to loosen this nut up and spin it. Actually, it looks like it's already loose. Yeah, it's already loose. So usually this is supposed to be tight. So this would spin all the way until that nut there was all the way forward, and that's what keeps the throttle cable tight. So I'll show you what it's supposed to be like. So this should be tight like that, okay? And the way you get this off is you just spin it this way until you can just simply pull it out, and then it's gonna come out of the first hole right there. So this wraps around. I'm gonna pull it out, and then there's a little, can't really tell if you can see it, it's really tough to get from down here, but there's a little groove on top here that the cable has to come out of. It's on the very top. I'm trying to see, yeah, you can see it right up there. That's where the cable comes out of. I'm just gonna pull that off and out, and then now that cable is out. Okay, so now that's one less thing we have to do. Now we can start, we can go back to the other side and we can pull the carburetor off the bike. All right, so now we're back on this side. So one thing I do want to say too that you should do, it's the best practice when dealing with any carb, just for you know, keeping your workplace clean and not having to be covered in gas, is you want to drain the float bowl before you tilt the carburetor sideways or try to move it, because what will happen is when you tilt it, if the float bowl is full of gas, it'll leak here out of the drain hole and you'll have a mess. So what I like to do is take like a little a cap or like a little water bottle. We're going to turn this just slightly so we can get in there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take a hex and we're going to loosen that bolt right there, and then it's going to drain the fuel out of the float bowl so that we don't make a mess. All right, so I was able to break it free. This bolt was like rounded out, so I had to use a Torx instead of a hex to loosen up the bolt. So now I have it finger loose. So what you want to do is, if you don't have like a water bottle or something like that, I mean, I guess you could hook like a hose on there. There's usually a hose on there for the drain, but it's not there anymore. So I found this little cap. It's just for spray paint. So I'm going to put that there to catch the fuel. And this will be big enough. It'll be plenty to hold the fuel. So what we're gonna do is hold that. This is gonna be tough with one hand, but let me me see if I can set the camera on my knee. All right, so then we can open this. This is also another way to make sure that your carb is working correctly and you're actually getting fuel in the float bowl. So, you know, if you have the fuel on and you know, you open this drain, there's no fuel coming out, then you know that there's a float issue or a needle issue inside the carb. Or, you know, if you have the fuel on and, you know, there's just not enough and here's only a little bit of gas, and you know that you have to adjust your float level. So, but like I said before, this is good because it won't make a mess when you go to tilt the carb. Gas won't drip all over you. So we'll let that drain out, and then as soon as it's done, then we'll close this. I always have to close it right after, because sometimes you'll end up forgetting to tighten that back up, and then you'll turn the fuel on and then you'll have gas pouring everywhere. So I always tighten that back up immediately after I get done draining the float bowl. All right, so now we got the fuel drained out and good amount of fuel in there, which is good. That means our float's adjusted properly, and there's no dirt in the bottom. It's really clean, which is good. That means it's a good sign this inside of this carburetor is probably clean. So what we can do is, instead of wasting this, we can just simply pour it back into the fuel tank, carefully. And this way you don't waste it. Now, if it was old gas sitting in the carburetor, or if it was dirty, then obviously you wouldn't want to pour it back into your gas tank, but in this situation we can. So, all right, so now, next step, since we got everything disconnected, everything's good to go. Last step would just be to pull the carburetor out of the boot here, and then we will pull it out of the bike. So we can do that now. We can wiggle it. It should come right out, and then we'll pull it this way, bottom out first. Okay, and then this will reveal the two connectors. So this is throttle position sensor, I believe, and one other sensor. I forget. One of you guys will probably correct me, but this one is the one that we're going to be bypassing. The TPS, the throttle position sensor. This I have on order. Eliminates this plug here. This will actually help give the bike a little bit more power, because it basically tricks the bike into thinking it's in full throttle all the time. So it messes with the ignition timing, which it's not going to hurt it at all. It's fine, but it also helps it eliminate some of the bog as well. So I'll show you the plug that we're going to be using once it comes in. It's on order, and basically these two just disconnect, and then once you disconnect both of these, we'll literally have the carb in our hands. So let's go ahead and get it disconnected. I'm gonna have to put the camera down, but basically what you're gonna do is you're going to squeeze that tab there and pull, and then you're also going to squeeze that tab there and pull, and that'll disconnect the connectors.